Guys, this podcast is brought to you by our friends at Wrestling Collector Shop. Make sure when you need to add new figures to your FigFed lineup, you head over to WrestlingCollectorShop.com.
Started by collectors for collectors around the globe, Wrestling Collector Shop has been serving fans the latest and greatest in wrestling action figures since 2002. Whether you're looking for basics, elites, or ultimates, Wrestling Collector Shop should be your first stop the next time you're looking for wrestling figures.
So make sure to go to WrestlingCollectorShop.com and use promo code Swoggle to save yourself 10% on your entire order. That's WrestlingCollectorShop.com. Use promo code Swoggle and save yourself 10% on the newest and greatest wrestling figures out there.
That's more than 9%.
It's a state of affairs.
Is that your spooky season voice?
What did you say?
Your spooky season voice.
I hate the term spooky season. I hate it. I hate it so much that it's like a thing.
I mean, I just hate the season.
You hate Halloween?
I hate holidays.
I'll bite. Joe, why do you hate holidays?
Because it's a lot of work for nothing. Like,
I love it.
Take Christmas, for instance. Christmas is always the example I use. I absolutely disdain Christmas.
Love it.
Because we spend all this time decorating and pulling out the decorations from the year before and then taking them out, opening them up, hanging them up, plugging this in, only so we can take them down 2 weeks later and fucking go through all that work all over again. Guys, efficiency is the name of the game. What are we doing here? I'll tell you what, I don't care what you celebrate. You ain't gonna come to my house and find a wreath. You ain't gonna find a tree. You ain't gonna find a skeleton.
You don't put any bit up.
Any of this shit.
You put nothing up.
No, because you know what it is? It's fucking Tuesday.
I love it. I love every holiday.
I hate holidays.
I love Christmas. I love Halloween. I love them. They make me happy.
Like a good mortgage, I got no interest.
Guys, it's a state of affairs. Joe, lead us in, because I always mess it up.
Guys, I'm Captain Joe Shoes, one of the hosts here. You guys know my friend Dylan, WWE legend, 6-time WrestleMania superstar, friends with Shaq, I guess. I don't know if you listen to his other podcast.
That's my guy.
Yeah, well, who? All your guys are your guys.
Oh, my guys are mine. You can meet me once. That's my guy. The Rock. My guy.
Once did a promo with The Rock that he completely forgot about until he was reminded of it and shown video evidence. But this is a State of Affairs, a debate style podcast where we are given a topic and debate the merits of said topic. And this is our 13th round doing as such. And Dylan, after our last episode, which was hotly contested.
We don't need to talk about it.
It was the Backstreet Boys versus NSYNC, a battle of 1990s boy band icons. I had the Backstreet Boys, you had NSYNC, and the fans had the vote. And the way they voted was 64% in favor of Captain Joe Shoes and the Backstreet Boys. So that basically makes me a Backstreet Boys.
I am so mad about how many comments on the YouTube page or the YouTube video and tweets and all of that were pro Backstreet Boys. I thought for sure, I was like, you know what? I think I got this one. And then hold on, because you're going to fire me up.
I would never do such a thing.
18
I'm here to
minutes,
be friends.
We're 18 minutes into this podcast and you're already firing me up. You come at me with facts. With bullshit.
God, oh no.
With bullshit. We always talk from the heart. It's a very heartfelt podcast.
I don't
just
have
like
a heart.
Postl. And you come at me with #1, all of that in TRL and album sales, you come at me with facts, and nothing I did was facts. It was all feeling. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Shoes deals with facts.
The facilitator of facts, the doctor of data.
I hate you. I come at you with heart and feeling. That's the difference between us. He's a fact man.
The bigger problem with your heart and feeling is that it's half the size, and half the argument is what you get.
Let's be honest, I probably have an oversized heart.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
We're calling a spade.
Here's Dylan begging for votes with his oversized heart. Once again, on his knees, begging for votes.
The House of Oversized Hearts wants to accept you as a part of
the whole house now.
The whole house. The whole house of
that
oversized
escalated
hearts.
quickly.
The Postl Cottage of Cholesterol wants to accept you.
You know what, guys? Here, right now, at the standings, the scoreboard says I am in the lead with 6 wins compared to Dylan's 4. We also have 2 ties. Go ahead and vote for Dylan this week. Let's give him.
Fuck you. No,
let's give him a pity win.
I don't need your pity votes. I don't need you playing the pity card for me. I don't need that.
You see, I would never come here and beg for votes. That's not my style.
No, not at all.
As Dylan said, I do it on facts and data. So go ahead and give Dylan a pity vote this week. On Friday, after this podcast drops, the poll will go up on our Twitter, our X account @AffairsPod, which is where you can find us everywhere on social media. Remember to follow. Of course, we also do those giveaways brought to you by our friends at Wrestling Collector Shop, where you can use code SWOGGLE at checkout to save 10%. And last episode, Dylan, we gave out an Elite Series 111 Sandman figure. You ever work with the Sandman?
I love the Sandman. I love that figure. I was talking to Landon the other day, and I really hope we get ECW, WWE ECW Sandman with the black t-shirt and the jeans. I hope it's coming. Or the black t-shirt and the black athletic pants, track pants. It's got to be coming down the pike, as they say.
Did you ever have to do anything with the Sandman? Ever a match or anything?
No. I was on a lot of house shows with him, though, because that's SmackDown toured with ECW. So I was always on the house show.
He was also one of the finalists to possibly be Vince's son. Remember, they were down to like guys with blonde hair.
He wouldn't leave the ring.
He forgot to leave the ring.
No. It's not that he forgot. He just flat out said, nope. And they had to make one on the fly for the guy in the back to say. Yes. Swear to you.
Oh, my goodness. I got to work with Hack once.
So you definitely took a caning.
I took one.
I think we talked about this. Was this last episode, I think?
I think you and I spoke about this. I don't know if it was on air.
Okay.
We did a drinking contest because he didn't feel like having a match and he wanted to get back on the road to go home to Philly as soon as possible. So we did a drinking contest where I would just casually sip my adult beverage until finally he got fed up with watching me. And then he took one big mighty swing with the kendo stick.
To the head or to the belly?
Oh, no, right to the head. But you know what? I will say he took care of me and he gave it to the shoulder, really.
Yeah.
Which still
good.
Fucking hurts. But
I would almost rather take one to the head than here. Yeah.
You know, it's weird with headshots because I always played soccer growing up. So it was always second nature to use my head with things, which you find out is not a good thing. But had a very entertaining little segment with Hack. Before I even got back through the curtain, he was already in the van and on his way home to
on the way back to Philly. Yep. Yeah. I love him, man. If you know Dylan Postl, you know that he does not like ECW. He does not.
Did you like it in the moment, though?
I hated it, Joe.
In the moment, you hated it.
I hated it.
Oh, okay.
So this is why. Because my buddies, Binder and Seth, loved ECW. Then they're like, hey, we need to show you being me, we need to show you ECW. They showed me the when it debuted on TNN. Because they're like, there's boobs, there's blood, there's like swearing. Then they turn it on TNN, and I'm going, what is this? This is awful. This is not good at all. And they're like, and even they were watching, like, oh, we shouldn't have showed him this, like, the first one. This was a really, really bad mistake. I hated it.
The first thing I was shown from ECW was Terry Funk versus Sabu in the Born to Be Wired match. That friends who I had in high school were like, no, you don't understand. ECW's a lot more real than WWE, like that, you know. And as the wrestling boom was picking up during the Monday Night Wars, especially growing up in Queens where ECW would run, whether it was once a month and I never really went to any of the shows.
I was going to say, did you go to a bunch?
I only went to the very last one at the Elks Lodge, which was kind of like the going away event. It was the Dudleys came back for a night. They were already in WWE.
Yep.
And if you get the fan cam version of that show, you will see a very young, still had a future and a hairline, Captain Joe Shoes in the crowd between matches, where the crowd is chanting to a woman who is sitting like 2 or 3 seats away from me to expose her upper body.
Okay.
And she's kind of no-selling it and just sitting there. And yours truly got up and did it for her. That way the crowd would lay off.
You exposed your chest or you exposed her chest?
I exposed mine and got a "you fat fuck" chant for the next 40 seconds.
For real?
Yes, that's a real story.
Guys, this is me telling Shoes, friend to friend, acquaintance to acquaintance. I have never seen this clip in my life. I
have it.
I need to see this clip.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
I need this because I never knew this. I need this one.
I want to say I was 18 years old. I think I was 18 when this happened.
Oh my God.
But yeah, I only got to go to maybe not even a real handful of ECW shows because I only heard about it like late in the game. Yeah. So I wasn't like a huge fan. Looking back now, I find it very squeamish to sit there and go, oh, that's not cool.
There's a lot. Hawkins will send some and like clips of that, that's on his algorithm on Twitter. And I go, oh man, 2024 does not hold up well.
So the Sandman, guys, that was one on our Instagram by @ShanerBainer0731. Congratulations. Enjoy your Sandman figure. And this week, Dylan, we are giving away an Elite 111. Apparently, this is a guy. Tony D'Angelo. Tony D'Angelo is not the NHL defenseman, apparently. I actually had to look that up because I kind of just assumed he was. But he's first time in the line. So congrats to Tony D'Angelo. Rookie figure. Follow us on all social media to see how you can win this Tony D'Angelo figure.
Guys, I got to go back to last week's episode. There was a comment that stood out on our YouTube video, the video version over at youtube.com/Dylan Postl,
where you can watch for free.
This human loves to hate me. It is none other than Mr. Stay Puffed, or as we call him, Justin. His comment on the Backstreet Boys.
I almost picked this one. I want you to know.
It made me so
I didn't, but I almost.
His comment on the Backstreet Boys versus NSYNC battle. It pisses me off just thinking about it. I can't get through it. I thought the presidential debate was last night, but here we are with Shoes giving thought out and descriptive points, and Dylan shouting out random superlatives and deathless shrimp references in the ramblings of a madman. Hey, Stay Puft. Fuck you.
All completely accurate.
I made a deathless shrimp reference?
Yes. You said that the Backstreet Boys were like the Indiana Pacers with deadlift shrimp.
Yep.
But I also picked a comment off our YouTube this week, and this is by @TerraYonJF.
Oh God.
And he said, this episode cleared up some things about Dylan. I thought he developed horrible takes over the course of his life, but this proved that he was born with them. Chris Kirkpatrick, really? That's your favorite member? Shoes wins. So Terayan JF, you are my Shoonie of the week. And Dylan, what we got a lot of feedback from that really pissed me off. And here I am, conquering hero, right? Here I am, 2/3 of the vote.
You're so mad.
Swaggy, feeling good about myself. The amount of people, and we did get a lot of feedback defending NSYNC, but they were like making the argument for you.
Exactly.
Stuff that you didn't even say that remember probably because, vodka and concussions, Dylan Postl doesn't have a memory.
100%.
They were like, I vote for NSYNC because Dylan forgot this, this, and this. And I'm like, well, he loses.
It made me so happy seeing those. And also, hey guys, posting those shitty Burger King fast food toys kick rocks.
So good.
Those do not count. Good. If you're counting those as toys compared to the NSYNC dolls, and you can, in your heart of hearts, say that those could even open the package of the NSYNC dolls, you have no brain cells.
The Backstreet Boys as superheroes, so good, amazing, and that's why.
Well, you know what? I can't.
That's why the Backstreet Boys are the victors this week, and you could be the victors by signing up to our Patreon at patreon.com/PodXchange for a ton of bonus content, including. If you're listening to this on release day on Wednesday, tomorrow night, Dylan and I will be live for our top tier members, our DLC pack members, with a live social dinnering where we break bread and chew the fat with our members. You can come on live with us and obviously chat with us. And once that's completed, we will be doing our monthly watch along for our deli sandwich tier members, which is a live watch along that you can chat along with us with. It is the 25th anniversary of this match selected by the members of our exclusive Patreon. It is the Big Boss Man. It is Al Snow. It is Kennel from Hell. And you know what?
Have you ever watched it?
I watched it live. Yeah.
I've seen it once in my life. Like
once was enough.
Years ago, and it was like we watched it. I had people over and we watched it as we were getting hammered, and I remember going like, this is worse than I even heard it was. Because
once they got the dogs into the cage, they just started peeing and pooping everywhere, and then like humping at one point.
Can't wait. I cannot wait.
So that was selected by the members of our Discord channel, private Discord that we have. I will say that soon after that match happened, there was a WWF cookbook that was released. Yeah. Like a legitimate cookbook. And in the cookbook, yes, was
Can You Take the Heat, it was called.
Yes. Yeah. And it had different recipes for like Perry Saturn Super Cookies was a good one.
Yeah.
And one of the recipes was the Big Boss Man's pepper steak.
Pepper steak. Yeah.
And then it was legit like ingredients, one dog. And then, like, you turned the page, and then it was an actual pepper steak recipe.
Yeah.
But in the moment, that existed.
You know, man, I wonder if, like, guys in that have ever signed them. Like, that's, to me, that's a cool one. Not the encyclopedia, because there's too many to get in there. But, like, getting the Can You Take the Heat cookbook signed by people, that's a me thing that I would love to, like, start doing. There's got to be a... Oh, I'm sorry for bringing up a fucking fun idea that I had. Joe, go fuck yourself. I'll just keep my ideas to myself.
I'm just curious as to why the cookbook, like the encyclopedia, has got thousands of options and hard to get ones. And I feel like even some of the more obscure ones.
I love getting random things signed. Yeah. I like when Luger came in for Wrestling Con and I got him to sign the USS Intrepid.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
When I was probably like 17 or 18 probably, one of the things I tried to get signed was the PWI 500.
By everyone?
I wanted to see how many people I could get in the PWI 500. This was like 2000.
So you're going, man, Jericho. I'm going to get Jericho. I'm going to get Glacier, who at the time was probably like number 18, knowing the PWI 500.
Like, I think at that point, I was like, I would be so ecstatic when I'd get like gregarious Greg Spitz. Have you ever heard of Greg Spitz?
Never heard that name in my life.
He was a Pennsylvania worker, and he was one half of the tag team, the Well Hung Warriors, with Mark Smart. And Greg Spitz, I don't know, he was like 363 this year. And I was like, yo, dude, I need you to sign my... And he was like, okay. And I was like, yeah.
You got it?
Of course.
Oh, that's awesome. Hell yeah. Guys, that's enough talking about the sham of a voting last episode was. I live by one thing. You can't look into the rearview mirror because the range of sight is very small compared to the windshield. So you always have to keep looking forward. And I look forward to this week. I look forward, as you saw in the title, to Super Nintendo versus Sega Genesis. Before we do that, before we get into the battle, before we start taking pot shots, as one of us loves to do at the other, Joe, what do we have to do?
Ad break. All right, guys, I'm going to kick us off this week. I am taking the side of Sega Genesis, and for the simple reason that I was a Genesis kid. When, as Dylan likes to point out, I may be a couple of years older than some people, but I would like to say maybe I'm just a little wiser. Maybe that gave me a little more experience. And when it came to begging my family for the 16-bit upgrade to my original Nintendo Entertainment System, well, for me, there was only one choice, and it was an easy one. It was the Sega Genesis. Because although released in 1989, it didn't really get huge for another 2 years when they started packing it with the Sonic the Hedgehog game, which gave it a real comparable, a real rival to the pack-in game of Mario, the Mario Brothers. Super Mario World, I believe, was the SNES game that came with it. But for me, the biggest thing as a young 10-year-old boy was the quality of the sports games. I love sports all growing up. I've always been a huge sports guy. Even on the NES, my favorite games were the baseball games and the hockey games and the football games. And now I could take those games to the next level with things like save points that may or may not work for the NES based on the battery backup that could save it. And maybe you'd get one more play out of that backup, but then it would just disappear the next time you turned on your NES. Now I had games like Sports Talk Baseball where they did actual commentary over the games. It was incredible. And the commentary, was a bit redundant, but it was novel. It was new. It was an upgrade from what we had been used to. And then we got all the incredible games from Electronic Arts, or as you guys know them, EA Sports. And their games on the Sega Genesis compared to those same versions on the SNES were far superior because of the faster processor within the Sega Genesis that allowed a smoother game flow and the ability to have more things built into the data of these cartridge games. So, Dylan, go ahead. That's my initial argument for the. I see you taking notes with your grubby little fingers over there. What do you got?
Joe, all you have to ask is the additional 20.1 million people that purchased an SNES.
That's incorrect number.
It is not.
It is.
49.1 million minus 29 million.
There's no way that's real. That's no way that's real.
100% it's real.
Where are you getting that
Google.
That line from? Google.
Google.
Oh, so now you trust Google.
I trust Joe. I didn't interrupt you, sir. I did not interrupt you. Just remember, I wasn't the one to talk over first this week. Just remember that.
At least we kept it nice so far.
It's been real nice. All you have to ask is the additional 20 million people that purchased an SNES instead of a Sega. Guys, all I have to say is it is iconic. When you think of the 90s system, you think of a Super Nintendo. 100% of the 90% of the time, you think of a Super Nintendo. The first battle, I'll put out a first battle. The controller. The Super Nintendo controller, again, I'm going to use it a lot. Iconic. You had the 4 buttons up front. You had the 2, for the first time ever, the 2 little finger clicking buttons, as they would be called in my household. You had the great D-pad. It held great. The first Sega controller, you had 3 buttons.
Mm-hmm.
3 buttons. A, B, and C you out of here. Get out. That's all you had. All you had. And then Sega felt the pressure. They did. And they added more buttons to be more like Super Nintendo. To give Super Nintendo a little bit of a fight. You ain't giving Super Nintendo a fight. You ain't doing it. What do you have?
See, this is comical because for years, the Sega Genesis outsold the Super Nintendo for years, based primarily upon the release of Sonic the Hedgehog and definitely Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Lesser than Mario.
Sonic the Hedgehog 2, one of the greatest selling video games of all time, sold over 3 million units.
I hate you.
In its first 2 weeks alone, Dylan. And because of that, because of the popularity of Sonic, and because of the faster processor that was put into the Sega Genesis, it became more of the gamer's console. When you had games that were ported over from the arcade, the Sega Genesis was a more authentic arcade experience. So when a big title like Mortal Kombat was ported over to the home console, you know what it was better on? The Sega Genesis. And not just because of speed and graphics, but because they kept in the blood. And when that became a hot button issue in the 90s, violence in video games, you know what Nintendo did? They bent the knee. Because Nintendo is pussy. And Sega Genesis.
I wasn't expecting that. One.
And you know what Sega Genesis did? They said, okay, government, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put our own rating system.
The anti-establishment, you're saying.
Anti-establishment. Sega Genesis is punk rock. Because not only did they put on their own age restriction guideline on every game going forward, but then they put in a code so you could work around it. Mortal Kombat may have only been 13 and above, but you know what? They put in a code so you could unlock the blood and get around it. But when the government played it, they didn't know the ABBACAB. They didn't know the code to get the blood, to keep the original fatalities. And that's why Mortal Kombat was much more successful on the Sega Genesis. We had, because Sega didn't have, it wasn't 20 million
more successful.
No, because I think that's a false number. And
it's a fucking false number.
I will say,
Googled it. I Googled the sales.
Where Sega screwed up was, I think they abandoned the Genesis a little too early in order to get ahead of the game for its next gen console, Sega Saturn, which ended up being a huge flop. But because huge flop. But that has no effect on the quality of the Genesis.
Let's not talk about Sega CD, by the way.
I was about to talk about Sega CD.
You're going to go, get out of here.
Because what Genesis did was they innovated. And sure, not everything is going to work, but the fact that they gave you these options with add-ons like the Sega CD or like the 32X to increase the game value, the production value, the quality of the games. And did it always work? No. Sega CD, as someone who had a Sega CD, Was it the best? No. The load times were absolutely disgustingly horrible. But they gave it a try, and that was at the time where we thought CDs were going to be the media to take us into the future. We felt like the fucking Jetsons with CD technology.
I'm throwing the flag.
Go ahead.
You cannot use Sega CD as part of your argument.
I'll say while the execution may not have been the best.
It's a completely different system.
No, it's an add-on to your original Sega Genesis. It needs to be attached. Yes, yeah. It needs to be attached to your Genesis. The original version of the Sega CD.
I thought it was just a legit console. Like essentially that would be me saying I can use the GameCube.
No. Sega CD is an attachment to your pre-existing Genesis.
I will see your attachment, sir, and bring up one thing. The Super Game Boy. You have a Game Boy? You want to play those games at home and not on a small little screen? You get a Super Game Boy. And you can play every one of your Game Boy games on the big screen, baby. You want to play Mario for Game Boy on your television? Throw it in the Super Game Boy. You want to play Tetris on your television? Throw it in your Super Game Boy. I'll see your Sega CD and kick it right in its dick with the Super Game Boy.
Well, you're not, because you're still playing lower quality games on your attached Super Nintendo. What the Sega CD gave you was enhanced CD quality. What the 32X gave you was 32-bit graphics in a time where we weren't getting that. So you telling me that I could play Tetris on a big screen, no big fucking deal. Tetris existed on the NES. Just because I can play it on a Super Game Boy.
You did not have a Super Scope 6, Joe. You had a shitty CD with crappy loading times. I had a goddamned bazooka. You ever wanted to shoot a bazooka? You ever shot a bazooka, Joe? Not a bazooka, Joe, like the game. Gum. Have you ever shot a bazooka, Joe?
3 times.
He's lying. Again, he is lying through his stupid teeth.
Never do that. Facts and data. You said it yourself.
He's lying. Joe, show me a photo of you shooting a bazooka that we can show on this podcast, not on OnlyFans. Show me a photo of you with a military grade bazooka. And I, again, argue the Super Scope 6. No technology since Duck Hunt had something like that. It was Duck Hunt, and then it was Super Scope 6, baby. You shot a bazooka at your television. You looked down the eye scope. You held it on your shoulder. I couldn't reach it, so I couldn't look through the eye scope. So I had to go here and just willy-nilly it. I had little arms. I'm a dwarf. I know. I had a goddamn bazooka as a video game.
Dylan, when we talk about quality of games, because Sega had to make up ground in just the brand recognition to begin with, because their original 8-bit system, the Sega Master System?
Dog shit.
It was okay. It just never caught on, especially to the extent that Nintendo did. It had fine games. It had its own version of Duck Hunt with different animals. You could kill like armadillos and stuff if that's, your thing, So if you wanted a gun, I'm sorry. So ducks are fine. And you using the bazooka is fine.
You would rather go out of your way to kill an armadillo than a duck?
I'm a city boy. We don't do critters.
You do ducks?
No, because we don't have them, so I don't have to worry about them. You put a possum or something
in Florida.
But I'm originally from the city where this stuff doesn't exist. When I see a possum or an armadillo,
I see it in Times Square,
if it goes through my parking lot,
you're in Times Square. You see Shitty Elmo, weirdo Mickey Minnie Mouse, and then you see a goddamned armadillo.
I'm saying because of that, when I see them now, I'm terrified. So of course I want to shoot them. Because they're horrible little critters. They probably got the rabies.
An armadillo is adorable. They should be called adorabadillos.
No,
that's what they should be called.
They are horrible, awful little creatures. And you know what? Not only would I shoot them, I'd shoot them twice, and then I'd kick them but I would be afraid to get the rabies on my shoe because I don't know if you get shoe rabies. What if it track it into the house? What if it gets on the carpet? And just because I know a good rabies guy doesn't mean that I should look to get rabies.
Guy. Bullshit. You don't have a rabies guy. You're
what if
making
I
up
do?
more stuff. The masterful of the magician of makeup. That's what you are.
The winner. Sega Genesis gave us celebrity tie-in games. We had Michael Jackson's Moonwalker when Michael Jackson was the biggest celebrity on the planet. We had Michael Jordan
versus the Windy City.
Cool.
Chaos in the Windy City.
We didn't have Michael Jordan in basketball games on the SNES.
We did not.
But you had him versus the Windy City. Cool.
We didn't have him in the basketball
games. You know
games,
what we had over on Sega Genesis? We had Michael Jordan in Bulls versus Blazers and the NBA playoffs.
Hold on.
Was that ported on SNES?
I thought that was for NES.
I definitely had it on the Genesis.
I thought that was an NES game.
Well, up until EA transferred like the playoff games and had the full league when they transferred it over to the NBA Live series, we had Michael Jordan in those games. What we didn't have Michael Jordan in was the NBA Jam games, which is a travesty.
Unreal. Guys, I have to say one thing. To win this argument, if you, in your heart of hearts, because we go off heart, we go off feelings on this podcast. If you, in your heart of hearts, can say Sonic could even tie Mario's shoes, character versus character, one versus the other, icon versus icon, if you think Sonic could even lace Mario's boots, you need a brainiotomy. You're just insane.
Dylan, once again,
what are you going to do?
Just like your Musk, your argument does not pass the smell test.
Bullshit.
Because this is not about
Sonic. It is
the legacy of character versus character. This is simply about 16-bit versus 16-bit. And in the world of SNES versus Sega Genesis, Sonic ruled all. Toe Jam and Earl.
Fuck
ruled.
Toe Jam and Earl. Super Metroid.
Tommy Lasorda's baseball.
Get
ruled.
It out.
The EA Sports franchises ruled.
Donkey
the Beavis and Butthead games.
Country. Donkey.
Aladdin on the Sega Genesis. Completely different game.
Shut
and
up.
A complete 180. More levels.
Shut up.
Better weapons. Better graphics. More difficult. Aladdin, The Lion King. Those games came to Genesis to kick ass. And at the end of the day, Dylan, to close my argument,
this will be great.
Genesis does what Nintendo don't.
Let me see your goddamn Google search history right now. Let me see your goddamn.
That was the tagline.
Was it really? I knew it was.
Tagline. That was the commercial line in the day.
That's a fucking good tagline, I will say. That's a really good tagline. Guys, when I think of SNES, I think of Mario, which legitimately isn't just Super Mario World. Then you go to Super Mario Kart, which, I mean, that started the Mario Kart boom, obviously. And
but the Mario Kart is bigger because of 64 than anything it did. Just because it originated on SNES doesn't mean that's where...
I loved it.
It's the 64... this is like saying the regular first version of Mario Brothers is so... It did nothing. It's a shitty game. Super Mario Brothers is where it started. And once they got to 16-bit, Super Mario World is a fun game, but it just doesn't hold up to what became a run of dominance for the Sonic games. And the reason...
compared to Mario?
A run of dominance. Like me against you in this podcast.
Sonic 1 sucks. Sonic 2, I'll give you. I loved Sonic 2.
Sonic 1 absolutely swung in favor of Genesis. And that's why Genesis was the better selling console up through the middle of the 90s until Sega abandoned the Genesis to try to get ahead of the trends by moving up to the Saturn. And Nintendo, to their credit, and I will say this, to their credit, Nintendo still saw the value in the SNES and kept production going with newer games, with more consoles. And that's why at the end of the I think 20 million is an excessive amount. I would have to check that number.
Check it.
If I would have to. I'm in the middle of a very important discussion right now, so I don't necessarily have the time. I do know for a fact that SNES ended up being the higher selling console at the end of the day, but it was really only because the Genesis abandoned ship and went to the newer gen console.
Because they realized it was dog shit.
Then why did it beat Nintendo 5 Christmas holidays in a row?
I don't know that to be true either. I'm in the middle of a very important podcast.
That?
I'm in the middle of a very important podcast. I can't do that. We talked Mario and Sonic. Give me the next most iconic game on Sega.
The EA Sports games. That's where, we had...
You think those are level of Donkey Kong? The Donkey Kong Country series?
The Sega Genesis is where people came to game. It was the first generation of real gamers. If you were a sports gamer... You know
what? I'll give you that. I will say SNES was the family console. I will say...
100%.
I think...
It was
your guys' was the gaming...
The first time where at-home true gamers went to play was on the Sega Genesis. And that was with the sports games. How many people in your life do you know that camp out every year in August to get the new Madden game? Or the run we saw this year because a new NCAA football game came out. Yeah. And all of a sudden, a bunch of people who I'd never heard from in years are posting about playing college football on PS5 or whatever we're up to now.
I'll give you this. My grandpa and my uncle lived in this house. They had a Sega. So when I came over to sleep over at Grandpa's house, I would play the Sega and I would play Madden a lot because I will say the SNES version was not great.
The sports games were always a step below on the SNES.
Yep.
And even the fighting games. This is where fighting games became very popular and part of the mainstream because of games like Street Fighter, because of games like Mortal Kombat. Now, the SNES did get Street Fighter 2 first, which was an arcade port over. The SNES did get that first, but then as soon as it went to Genesis, once Capcom released the Genesis version, it sold in the millions right off the bat. It did go
over on Genesis? I didn't know that.
It eventually made its way over to Genesis, yes.
Okay, I thought it was just Super Nintendo. I thought all the Street Fighters were just Super Nintendo.
Super Nintendo had it significantly earlier than the Genesis.
But definitely bigger on Super Nintendo?
Probably just because they had it first. But once it made its way over to the Genesis, it did sell over 1 million copies almost immediately. Like, those aren't small numbers. You know, sometimes we get taken aback by numbers that we hear, you know, like when you say something like, 20 million more, like 20 million more is a very, very significant number, you know,
especially for that time, for how expensive consoles were at that time.
You know, and at that time too, where Sega really made a great decision was in the initial release of the Sega. It was packed with a game called Altered Beast, which was like a side-scrolling beat-em-up.
I do love Altered Beast. I will say I love Altered Beast.
Altered Beast was a game that I would have in like a local deli, would have like an arcade machine in the corner.
Oh, really?
And I'd play it like here and there. I'd be like, oh, this game's okay. But that wasn't really like my style of games, like Altered Beast, Castlevania. They were okay. I could play them for a little bit, but it was never something I would let myself get really, really invested in. And early on, when the Genesis did come out, it had a higher price point, and Altered Beast really wasn't as known to consumers around where they were going to run out and feel like they needed a Genesis. And that's why they had like an internal company contest at Sega to come up with a character that could compete with Mario. And we got Sonic the Hedgehog. And then what they did that was intelligent was they repacked the Sega console with Sonic.
That's what I was going to just ask. Did they
lower the price point?
Oh, okay.
So Sonic became critically acclaimed almost immediately. And then with the added lower price point, That's why we saw an extended run of leadership in the 16-bit game for the Genesis. And obviously Sonic 2 just went over the top. And the following, obviously Sonic and Tails, Sonic and Knuckles, those are all great selling games. Surprisingly, one of the top 5 selling Genesis games from my research is actually Aladdin. And that's why I brought it up. Aladdin on the Sega Genesis was a massive seller.
I think it was because of the additions to it. The additions compared to this SNES version. I think that was a big thing.
Looking back, it's kind of crazy that you could have such significant differences in the same games on different consoles, but it's because of the way the consoles were built, what you were able to do with them. And now I am so much less invested in gaming in today's world than I was back when I'm
still in. I love.
To me,
that's
video
games,
man. Video games is strictly a complete decompression from the world. I work a lot. I have a regular job. I do this show. We have Patreon content. I do what I do with the major pod guys. I have some sort of, for me to play a video game, I don't want to think. I don't want to work. I'm strictly there to play NBA 2K and score 50 points. I like the difficulty of the game does not matter to me. I'm there just to strictly decompress. And I appreciate the video games in my life to have that option to give me something that's visually just stimulating and taking my mind away. But I can't tell you how different games of today are between Xbox and PlayStation. But back on Sega Genesis, when I would go to a friend's house who had Super Nintendo instead, and we would play NHL 96, the difference was vast.
Really?
The difference was noticeable.
I never played sport. You know me, shocking. I'm not a sports guy, as we know. So I only played Madden over at Grandpa's. I never really played it until later in life on Super, where I realized the difference.
See, the sports games to me, especially around that age where I was starting to get a little bit older, because now I'm 11 or 12, and I'm much more concerned with going out and being on teams and playing sports than I am with watching cartoons or collecting toys. So for Christmas, during those 16-bit years, my Christmas list was legitimately every year, NHL, whatever year it was, NBA Live, whatever year it was, Madden, whatever year it was. My birthday's in September, so usually I could get the Madden in September, and then I'd have to wait until NHL for Christmas or something. But I would play all of those EA Sports. An EA Sports game, a drop was like, I couldn't miss it. When Mortal Kombat came out, once again, fighting games, the gore, that's not really my thing, but Mortal Kombat had crossed. I hated
fighting games. I've always been so bad at the side-by-side fighting games. I've always been horrible at them.
I'm not good at them, and I don't get interested in them. RPGs, for instance. How many people get lost in RPGs? The Final Fantasies of the world.
Super Mario RPG and Paper Mario are the only RPGs I've ever played in my life.
My brother is a huge Final Fantasy guy, and I think he got into it on the first PlayStation or something. And I just look at Legend of Zelda is an RPG, really. And I remember this. You want to hear a story? When I made communion in the 2nd grade, one of the gifts I got was The Legend of Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link for NES. And that game was like brand new, so I even got the gold cartridge.
The gold one. Yeah, I was going to ask if you got the gold one. Yeah.
My communion, I got Legend of Zelda 2: Adventures of Link. I got a Mr. Fuji LJN figure, and I got a WrestleMania 5 program that I remember getting for some reason.
Okay.
And I remember putting Legend of Zelda into my Nintendo because I never had Zelda 1, the regular Legends of Zelda. Never had it, but I had not even just Nintendo Power. Before Nintendo Power, there was Nintendo Fun Club magazine that I used to get.
Okay.
And when they switched over to Nintendo Power, I started getting it. So the first issue of Nintendo Power, which is like the clay Mario on the cover, I had that delivered to my house with the label on it, with my name on it. That's how old I am. But I had heard so much about Zelda. Remember, we had there were so many commercials for the time of hot games coming out where you had like the guys rapping, like white guys sitting on a couch rapping.
Yeah.
It's the Legend of Zelda and it's really rad. Those bad guys are total like what are we doing here? But it was so built up in my mind how cool Legend of Zelda was going to be. I spent about 10 minutes on this game, took it out of my system, never put it back in. At 7 years old, I was already done with this.
Already done with it. I always hated RPGs. Always.
It was just not for me. And I got really into the Capcom games near the end of the systems run, the NES systems run. You had those Disney Capcom games. Were awesome. I liked Mega Man.
I was never a Mega Man person. It just didn't get me. I loved the Disney Capcoms. Man.
I like the variety of villains in Mega Man.
Yeah.
And the music. And I'm not someone who's going to sit here and talk video game soundtracks to you, but there was something about the Mega Man soundtracks that was always different than the rest of them.
Yep. It felt different.
So I could always appreciate that. But then especially like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, it never felt the same after that. We got an SNES version of Punch-Out, but it wasn't as good.
Yeah,
it didn't have
it tried to maybe like be a nod back, and it didn't hit.
No, it just didn't hit the same way. In fact, I didn't feel the same about a boxing game where I was really into it until the Dreamcast version of Ready to Rumble boxing, where I was
is that the
this
cartoon
is just
one?
Yes.
N64 had one too, right?
A fun game. Maybe. I would assume so. Dreamcast had more of an arcadey style to it.
Yeah.
It was a very underrated system, in my opinion. But I think in the aftermath of the Sega Saturn, which was a colossal failure, the Dreamcast almost didn't stand a chance.
Closing argument for Little Dill. When you think of the iconic video game system of the early 90s, you think of Super Nintendo. This is very much a nostalgia battle. I think we're going to realize how old we are in this battle, because a lot of the voters are going to be like, I don't know either of these.
I don't know any of these. I mean, that's what we hit with that LJN Hasbro, but at least this time, we're not debating eras, we're debating competitors of the era.
Which I want to hit on real quick. Guys, if you haven't checked it out, I'm going to bet my good pal Shoes hasn't. There's a documentary called Console Wars.
I have.
It is so incredible. It shocks me that you have, because it's video games. It is.
I'm still interested. Awesome. It's very pop culture, and I am interested in the history of stuff like that. Especially
I've watched
if you
it many
ever.
Times.
Console Wars is good. There's also a series documentary on, I believe might be on Tubi right now. It's called the Video Game Years, which basically breaks down all different years by episode. So each episode is a different year, and you get all kind of these pop culture and video game commentators talking about the games of the year, games of the era, arcade, pinball, all sorts of stuff, including an appearance by our double main man, Pixel Dan. He's involved in that a little bit. There's if you go to Amazon Prime for a long time was a wasteland for content, but you could find a lot of good oddball documentaries, and they had a significant amount of pretty cool video game documentaries, including one called Game Over, which was the story of the Atari 2600's ET game and whether or not it was buried in the garbage dump in New Mexico.
Yeah.
There's also another one called, I don't know if it's Game Chaser or something, but it's about a guy who's trying to put together a full collection of original licensed Nintendo Entertainment System games. And there are some really hard pulls. The guy to go to for stuff like that is our man, Mark Bitters. Mark Bitters is like an encyclopedia of vintage gaming.
I can't wait. I can't wait to send him this episode personally and be like, hey, you got to pick. I don't know who he is. I think he's more of a Nintendo guy. I hope he is.
So my biggest thing here is Nintendo will always have the name value. But the Sega Genesis is the WCW Monday Nitro of the era. and it had its run. And eventually that candle burnt out because of poor leadership. But it is unmistakable for its place. It was for 83 weeks.
Oh, fuck yeah. No, we're not doing this.
But for years.
49.1 million versus 29 million.
For a significant amount of years, the Sega Genesis outsold the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. And it had better games. It had better quality. It had new and exciting characters where Mario was already feeling a bit long in the teeth.
You're insane.
You're a
crazy person. You're
what Nintendo don't.
Guys, who do you got? Are you team Sega Genesis or are you on the winning team of Team SNES? Make your voice heard. Watch for the poll on Twitter/X. We want to hear your comments. Guys, we love your comments on YouTube, on all forms of social, wherever you leave the comments. We absolutely love seeing them. They make us laugh each and every time. Keep those comments coming. We love it.
Yeah, guys, follow everywhere on social media at AffairsPod. Like I said, the poll for this episode will go up the Friday following this release. So this episode drops on Wednesday. Friday around noon Eastern time, you can expect to see the poll go up on X, and it will stay open for the entirety of the weekend. And then, obviously, don't forget our giveaways. Our giveaways will go up once the episode releases, so be sure to check whether it's on Twitter or on Instagram. Maybe it's on our Facebook page or TikTok. Just stay tuned everywhere at AffairsPod.
Guys, you can follow me on all forms of social media at Dylan Postl. ProWrestlingTees.com/Swoggle. DylanPostl.com for everything me. That's me. Joe, where can we see you?
You can check me anywhere on social media at The Joe Shoes. In a couple of weeks, I will be making an appearance once again at Toy Ohio in Girard, Ohio. So come meet me there. If you're in the market for one of those exclusive Kowloon Major Bendy's figures, I will have some for sale there. And then in December, I will be making an appearance at the Queens Baseball Convention. It is a New York Mets themed convention with players, autograph opportunities, vendors, sports memorabilia, and I will be hosting a panel with former Met and my childhood sports hero, Mr. Greg Jeffries. And he may not be a big name within the sport of baseball.
I don't know baseball, but I know that name.
But that was my first ever favorite athlete. I had t-shirts. I had merch. I still have a bunch of stuff in the closet. I cannot wait I've waited my entire life to meet this guy.
That's
and here
insane.
I am.
That's awesome. I'm so happy.
A panel with my childhood sports hero.
It gives me a good tummy feeling, as I say. That's awesome.
So tickets for that will be on sale soon. It is taking place in Queens, New York, early on in December. So if that is up your alley, definitely check me out there and come say hello.
Guys, it's been another rousing episode of A State of Affairs. I'm Dylan. That's Joe. Joe.
And this has been The State of Affairs.
It's A State of Affairs. I hate the bubba. I hate the bubba. I hate the bubba. I don't know.
It's like when you're talking to the fan. I am your father.
Did you ever put your tongue in the fan?
Yeah, it sucked.
It was so bad.
Yeah, it was a big mistake, an egregious error in judgment.
Bye, guys.